This is a Canon Rebel digital camera, one of the most popular DSLRs ever made and used by, as far as I can tell, and I'm not great with numbers, I think over 100 billion people all over the world. And most of those people just want to do one thing with this camera. They just want to take awesome pictures of kids doing stuff. And if you're one of those people, you are in luck, because in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to set up this camera to get amazing pictures of kids doing stuff. Whether it's painting a picture, practicing the piano, or playing ping pong, here are the three methods I use to get perfect pictures with a Canon Rebel. Okay, first one, my least favorite, but the easiest to use, and I want you to use this method if you forget everything else and you just need to set it to something to get awesome pics. We're gonna set it to sports mode. Now, to set it to sports mode, you've got this little dial here on the top of the camera, and you can see this thing turns, and we wanna line up this little dude right here that looks like he's running with that white line right there. All right, with our camera in sports mode, we've got the camera set up to take pretty great photos of people and kids moving around, doing things, as long as it's bright outside. Here's the problem with sports mode. There are two of them. One is you are stuck. You can't override any of the settings if you need to. And two, it really struggles in low light. So like a nighttime football game or anything inside of a gym or a piano recital or an auditorium, you're gonna get less than awesome pictures. Sports mode, great when it's bright outside, and when you can't remember what the better settings are, use sports mode. But if it's a low light situation or you need to override the settings, sports mode, no good. And in that case, we're gonna wanna use shutter priority. So let's talk about that guy. Okay, so to switch the camera into shutter priority, we're gonna take this, again, this mode dial here on the top, and we're gonna change this to TV on a Canon Rebel digital camera. TV stands for time value, which is a terrible name, Canon, if you are listening. But this basically puts us in control of the shutter speed, which is exactly what we want when we are photographing people doing stuff. Don't worry, I'm not gonna make you memorize all the shutter speeds like I used to do with my photography students, but I do want you to know that the shutter speed is in control of what happens to people when they are moving around in your photos. If you've ever taken photos where people look really blurry as they're moving around in your picture, that's probably because the shutter speed was wrong. Or if you've ever taken photos where everything is completely frozen, it's a kid jumping into the pool and you can see every drop of water frozen, that was also the shutter speed. The shutter speed is what freezes objects or people in motion. Okay, so with the camera in shutter priority, we can now set the shutter speed. And I want to show you exactly how to do that. So I'm going to turn this camera on. I'm in shutter priority, and you can see there's a little box on the back of the camera around this number right here, that fraction, 1/160. That is the shutter speed that the camera is currently set to. That means the shutter is going to open and close in 1/160th of a second. That's pretty dang fast. You also have on your camera on the top this little knob right here, this little wheel, and you can see when I turn this wheel, that changes the shutter speed. On this camera, I can get a shutter speed all the way up to 1/4,000. That's incredibly quick. That's 1/4000th of a second. And I can go all the way down to 30 seconds, which doesn't seem like an incredibly long time, but in the world of photography, 30 seconds is forever. Now, if you were paying attention, that's a lot of numbers between 30 seconds and 1/4000. And the good thing is, I'm only gonna ask you to remember 3 of those numbers. And here they are. The first one is 1/125. This is the shutter speed I want you to use whenever you're taking pictures of people who aren't moving a whole ton. Like maybe they're sitting at a desk talking to a camera like I am right now, or maybe they're painting a picture or playing a game. This shutter speed is perfect as long as your subjects aren't moving too much. Okay, so 1/125, people are just hanging out, not moving too much. The next one I want you to remember, 1/250. Use this one when people are hanging out, but they're moving around a little bit more. Maybe they're singing or dancing a little bit, not moving super fast, but a little bit more active than just sitting at a desk and doing homework, right? So that one, 1/250. Notice that the number 125 went up to 250 as our subject started to move a little bit more. Well, guess what? We're gonna keep raising that number. So let's go all the way now to 1/1000. This is the third shutter speed I want you to remember. This is the shutter speed I want you to use if people are running around, jumping through the air, dancing energetically, playing football, whatever it is. If there is a lot of action going on, you want to use 1/1000. And what this is going to do is this is going to freeze that motion. All of these shutter speeds, in fact, are going to freeze motion. Did you notice that the less motion there is, the slower our shutter speed can be? 1/125 is a slower shutter speed, much slower than 1/1000. So 1/125 works when our people aren't moving very quickly. But as soon as people are starting to run around and move a lot faster, we have to use that faster shutter speed, 1/1000, to freeze that motion. Okay, that's it. Just remember those 3 shutter speeds and you're good to go. Now, there's a few other settings we need to dive into. And if you haven't yet, I want you to go grab your camera right now so you can follow along with me and set up your camera exactly how I'm about to set up this one. First, look right here on the back of the camera. See these 4 arrows? See how they have letters and shapes associated with them? Those are the 4 main settings that we're actually going to change. So the first one we're going to change is AF, or autofocus. So all I have to do is push right on this arrow, and you can see that brings up my autofocus mode settings. And for sports and action and people doing stuff, we want to be on AI servo. I want you to just set it to AI servo and don't ever change it ever. Deal? Okay, I'm just going to press the set button. Next, we have WB. This is white balance. Now, white balance is probably the most complicated of all of the settings. So guess what? You know what I want you to do? I want you to just put it on AWB. That stands for auto white balance. Digital cameras nowadays are pretty good at getting the white balance correctly. If your photos ever come out too blue or too orange, that is a white balance setting. And for now, while we're still just learning, we're just gonna set our white balance to auto and let the camera do the hard thinking for us. The next one is our drive button. I'm gonna go ahead and press that guy, and this brings up really only 2 options that we're gonna use: single shooting or continuous shooting. This is basically what happens when I press and hold down the shutter button right here. You can see when I have it at single shooting, I press and hold that button and it only takes 1 photo. If I set my drive, let's come out of here, set my drive to continuous shooting. When I press and hold this button, it just keeps taking photos. Which one do you think we're probably gonna wanna use for kids doing stuff? Probably continuous. So I'm gonna go ahead and set it to that one right there. And then our last option here on the back of the camera is ISO. So let's go ahead and press that button. And you can see we got a lot of options here. And guess what? For now, I want you to just set your ISO also to auto. Listen, as long as you're using the right shutter speed for the situation that you're in, setting your ISO to auto is perfect. A lot of pro photographers even use auto ISO. That's because that's just one less thing that they have to think about when they're photographing things that are moving quickly and they can't afford to miss the shot. There's just one last setting here in shutter priority that I want you to know, and that's this little scale right here. That's exposure compensation. That's the way we tell the camera that we want our photos to be either a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. And to do that, see this little AV plus or minus button back here? All we have to do is press and hold that down and then turn this little wheel on the top again, right? We're gonna turn that little guy. So turn this wheel and you can see if my photos are coming out too bright, I'm gonna go to -1 or maybe -2, somewhere around there. It just depends on how bright they're turning out. If they're turning out too dark, I'm gonna go to +1 or +2 or somewhere in that range as well. Just be careful, make sure that when you're done with exposure compensation, that you're putting this guy back to 0. And it turns out I totally just lied to you. There's one more setting I want you to see, and this is another one that you're gonna just set and forget about. You don't have to worry about it again, and that's this button right here. And what this guy does is it allows us to tell the camera where we want it to autofocus. So you see when I press and hold this down, I get these boxes on the back of the camera, and when I turn that wheel along the top, the box moves around to different places. And you can also see these same dots and boxes when you're looking through the viewfinder here. I think, honestly, I would just leave it on automatic selection and let the camera try to figure out what the best thing to focus on. If it ever is struggling or you really want it to focus on a certain spot, you can press this button again, turn the wheel, and maybe put it right there or wherever you need it to focus. But for the most part, I've had really good luck just leaving it on automatic selection. That is it for shutter priority. Now listen, if you didn't have your camera in your hands changing these settings as I was changing them right here in front of you, go back and grab your camera and watch this video over again and set your camera up exactly like this and go out and practice with those settings. Because if you can shoot in shutter priority, you can shoot in my third option, which is full manual. And I know that sounds scary, but honestly, it's really, really not that bad. We're only going to change one other setting that we didn't set when we were shooting in shutter priority. So let's jump into that one right now. So to switch this thing to manual, we just have to come up here to our mode dial and we're gonna put this guy in the letter M. M, of course, stands for manual, and that is much easier, in my opinion, to remember. Take a look at the back of this camera. You will notice in manual, there's really only one other setting that's now available that was not available before, and that's this one right here, the aperture. And aperture is a whole nother beast. I don't want you to worry about it. All I want you to do is when you're shooting in manual, set your shutter speed first, set everything else up exactly how I showed you, and then press again this AV plus or minus button. See how when I press that down, that box goes around the aperture or the f-stop? this allows me to change that number. And what I want you to do is I want you to take your zoom lens and I want you to zoom it all the way out, as high as it goes. So this one goes all the way up to 55. Then, leaving it there, I want you to press and hold this AV plus or minus button, and I want you to turn your aperture until it's absolutely as low as it can go. And you can see with my zoom at 55 millimeters, the lowest f-stop I can get to is f5.6. So I'm just gonna leave that there and I'm gonna start shooting. That's it, you guys. We are now shooting in full manual. All we had to do to get there was take control of the aperture and get it as low as it can possibly go. So when I photograph something like a basketball game where the light never changes throughout the whole game, I'll set my manual exposure before the game starts and I won't change it the entire time. Manual is perfect for something like that where the lighting's never gonna change, but it also works really well when the lighting is changing. For example, if you're photographing a football game, it might start with the sun up, then go to sunset, then go to dusk, and then the lights in the stadium come on. And by the end of the game, it's completely dark outside and the only light we're getting is from the lights in the stadium. That's a pretty huge difference in the level of light. And since we're setting up our camera correctly with our ISO in auto and using the correct shutter speed, we can let the camera deal with those adjustments even while we're shooting in manual, which is gonna give us some amazing photos and really take that load off of our shoulders of having to worry about whether or not we're getting the exposure correct. So that's it. Those are the 3 different methods I might use. Sports mode, which, spoiler alert, I don't actually ever use sports mode. Shutter priority, very rarely do I actually use that, and full manual. Now, because I used to teach photography, I'm gonna make sure that you understand this. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put a photo up on the screen, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the video, look at the photo, figure out how would you set up your camera to shoot in manual for this photograph right here. When you think you've got it, unpause it, and I'll show you the exact right settings. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how you did. In this photo, there's very little motion going on. I don't have to worry about freezing fast motion. So I'm gonna set my shutter speed first, and I'm gonna use a slow shutter speed, like 1/125. Next up is my aperture, my f-stop. I'm gonna zoom my lens in as far as it will go. I'm gonna hold down this AV plus or minus button, and I'm gonna just get that guy as low as it goes. Next up, going across is ISO. I'm gonna hit my ISO button right here, and I'm gonna put that on auto. Let's keep moving our way down. This little symbol right here is white balance, and so I'm gonna press the WB button here on the back of the camera, and I'm gonna set that to AWB. And next up, we need to go to our autofocus. Look at that, that is set incorrectly, so I'll just press the AF button, and we'll go to AI Servo. And last is our drive, which is this button right here. I'm gonna just press that guy and put it on continuous shooting. So if those are the settings that you used, you got it right. Well done. Now, if you got that one correct, these next 2 will be very easy because remember, we're not changing any other setting other than the shutter speed once we've got our manual set up. So let's take a look at photo number 2. Go ahead and pause the video and set up your camera for this photo. Okay, hopefully that one was very easy. We've got a lot of motion. Our subject is really moving quickly in this photo. So hopefully the only thing you changed was your shutter speed to 1/1000. That's it. That's all you needed to do for this photo. Everything else should have stayed exactly the same. Last photo, here we go. Go and pause the video and set up your camera for how you would set it for this photo. Okay, well, there was really only one option left, so that wasn't really fair, but hopefully you changed the shutter speed to 1/250. We've got a little bit more motion in this photo. Our subject's moving around a little bit more than they were in the first one, so we need to freeze that motion, so 1/250 is perfect. Okay, that's it, my friends. You now know exactly how to set up this camera to take pictures of people and kids doing stuff, and you're fully equipped to shoot in full manual exposure. That's incredible. Now, all I want you to do is go out and practice this over and over and over again until you can set up all of these settings without even having to think about it. And the thought of shooting in sports mode just seems ridiculous. Have a good one.